but these cuttings are going to bounce back just fine. Why? Because they're cold hardy to our area. So it's almost winter time now. What are we, November, I think 16th or something like that today. Maybe it's the 18th, I don't know. And people are getting more and more worried about their plants, their rooted cuttings in particular, every single day. So I thought I would talk to you guys a little bit about this subject because I'm getting more and more questions from people asking, how do I overwinter my rooted cuttings? How do I protect these guys? How do I keep them safe? Because people are getting nervous. And the problem is they got all these rooted cuttings and they're just about to go into winter here and they're just going, how do I know they're going to get through this? How do I know that we're going to get them on the other end in one piece? Well, I can't predict the future, but I can tell you that I've done this over and over and over again, and experience tells me that your rooted cuttings are going to be just fine as long as they're cold hardy to your area, you keep the roots moist through the winter, you give them some type of protection, and it doesn't have to be a lot. You just want to protect them from the cold, harsh, drying winter winds, especially if they're broadleafed evergreens. So just to make the point to you guys one more time, this is not a greenhouse. This is a cold frame or a hoop house or, you know, some type of a sheltering structure. It does not stay warm in here at all. Both ends are open on this guy, so I've got 4 by about 6 foot tall doors on either end, and they're wide open. I don't even have doors, in fact. They're just door frames, and the air can just easily flow through here. It doesn't blow through because it's protected by this covering, but air can flow through and heat can flow out the tops of both ends there. And so heat doesn't really build up in here through the winter. Now, in the summertime, it gets hotter than heck in here if I don't have the sides rolled up. But in the wintertime, we don't get enough sun and we don't get enough warmth to really add any temperature increase in here. It might be a degree or two warmer inside of here when the sun's actually shining, but that's it. And it doesn't stay warm in here at all. It's not enough to break anything out of dormancy or keep anything tropical alive through the winter. In fact, these rhododendrons all freeze hard as a rock through the winter, and the leaves droop over and curl up, and every year I look in here and I go, oh my gosh, they're all dying. Well, not anymore. In the beginning I used to do that, but I know that every spring they're going to bounce back and do just fine because these plants were built to freeze, and that's the point. You guys need to be working with plants that are cold hardy for your area. If you've got plants that aren't cold hardy to your area, that's fine. You're just going to have to give them extra protection. And that's just it. A lot of these plants are actually more cold hardy than most people realize. So, you know, like even the figs that are grown in the Mediterranean region, warmer climates, they take these cold climates just fine. I had all my figs in this hoop house, I think it was 2 years ago and last year, and we got down to 12 degrees last winter. And everything in here was frozen hard as a rock. The potting soil is frozen hard as a rock. The leaves on all the rhodies, like I said, are wilted down, and those figs came back just fine in the springtime. Got time for a short intermission, so this is just a few days after I filmed that last clip, and we're down to 25 degrees in here last night. It is cold, guys, and these rhododendrons, I wanted to show them to you while this was going on. Like I said, let's look at these guys. They are sucked down really good because of the freezing temperatures. Look at these leaves. They're just sucked in. Everything has gone to sleep for the winter, and despite these, look at this. Look at these curled up leaves. Look at that. They're just frozen solid. The medium down in there, the bark is just rock hard. 25 degrees in here last night. These are huge leaf rhododendrons, and they're all just sucked in and curled up right now. And it gets worse than this. Look at this one. Look at this. This is Odie Wright, a beautiful variety, and sometimes tends to be a more tender variety depending on the region you're in, how this thing's grown. But look at those leaves just curled up. I mean, it is cold in here right now, but come spring, these guys are going to take off. Everything's going to wake up, and they're just going to grow beautifully, despite the fact that they're freezing hard as a rock. Now this is a little bed of rhododendron cuttings that I have that are just really young, and they've only been rooted for about a year, I think, and we actually moved them in here so I can make room for more cuttings last summer. But look at these leaves, just sucked in. Everything is frozen hard as a rock. The medium down in there is frozen, but these cuttings are going to bounce back just fine. Why? Because they're cold hardy to our area. So I'm showing you guys all this just to show you that these rooted cuttings are much hardier than you might think. And although you're probably going to worry about them, I do too, they're going to bounce back and be just fine in the springtime. In fact, as long as I'm out here freezing my butt off, I might as well show you something else that I'm really passionate about. And I've tried to drive home over the years, and I hope you guys will come to use this system. But I'm going to go show it to you now. So I know you guys get so nervous about overwintering your rooted cuttings. This is my propagation frame, and this is the crux of everything I do here. And I know I've driven it home a number of times, but I can't recommend this enough. If you guys haven't got it yet, go to my website, click in the members area, sign up, get the thing. I show you how to build this 100% from scratch, start to finish, in a 2-hour video. I show you how I propagate everything around here, over 2 hours of video that go through start to finish over a year's time on propagating these rhododendrons. Enough of the sales pitch. I'm super passionate about this system, and it just flat works. And here's the proof. You guys are worried about overwintering your rooted cuttings? Look at this glass panel right now. Frozen hard as a rock. You can see the moisture that was built up in there, frozen in there, just frozen, a sheet of glass underneath it. But it's hard to see, and the camera's not going to pick it up. I've peered through this glass, or the freezing underneath the glass, and I'm able to see the thermometer I have down in there, and it's maintaining at 50 degrees in the rooting medium. So these are the cuttings that we took, the rhododendrons. If you guys remember, the rhododendron cuttings that we took last August. And they're so young that probably some of them don't even have roots yet, or very little roots, and some of them just have callus, but they're well protected in that little environment all through the winter, even when it gets down to 25 degrees, even when it gets down to 12 degrees around here. And it works in this system. Once they get through that first winter, they're hardy enough to freeze, like I showed you in those other little cuttings that were a year older than these guys. In fact, this thing's frozen so hard, I can't even lift the glass off. It'll probably break. Otherwise, I probably would lift it just to show you the thermostat, or the thermometer in there. But this setup really does work. So I'm trying to pick it up, but the ice in there isn't going to let it show real well, but I can see it with my own eyes. That's right at 50 degrees in there in the rooting medium, which is more than enough to get these cuttings through the winter. So if you guys had a setup like this, you don't have to worry about your new rooted cuttings. They'll do just fine in this frame for the first year, and then come spring, you turn all this off, and they just wake up and start growing like crazy. And just like these potted plants that are several years old, the rooted cuttings are just as hardy. But here's some things that will damage your rooted cuttings as well as older potted plants. Not watering them through the winter. Now, you don't have to water them every day like I do in the summertime. I probably only water in here once a month when it gets really cold. But the root ball does need to stay moist. If it dries out, you're essentially going to kill the plant. It needs some source of moisture through the winter time. Cold, harsh, hard, drying winds will also kill your little rooted cuttings. So you definitely want to protect them from a source of just real harsh, cold winter winds. And a lot of you live in areas that get snow and get even colder than I do here. And so you might want to build something. It doesn't have to be anything this elaborate, but something just to keep the wind off of them. Or if you don't have the resources, like usual, just place the cuttings on the north side of a building. At least in my area, we get all our wind from the southern areas, and so if I put things on the north side of a building, it's going to be protected from that cold, hard winter winds. And yeah, you're going to get some breezes blowing by, but it's the constant drying winds that will dry out your plants and dry out those roots and really suck the life out of your rooted cuttings. And like I said before, the biggest ones that will not make it through that are broadleaf evergreens, because they still have all their leaves attached to them, and these guys can lose lots of moisture, unlike deciduous plants that lose all their leaves, and they're a little more protected from those cold, harsh winter winds. And you'll notice that just by looking at the regions, the different regions in the world. Like in my area here, we have tons of evergreens that grow really easily all through the winter. We've got fir trees, we've got broadleaf evergreens, rhododendrons, laurels, all kinds of evergreens. They stay green year round. They hold their leaves onto them. But if you go back east, you'll see a lot of the trees there are deciduous. A lot of the shrubs are deciduous. And it's just, those plants are better for those climate regions. They get colder over there. They get more snow over there. They stay colder for longer periods of time. So once again, make sure you're growing things that are right for your area. Another thing you can do to protect your plants is put them in a garage or put them in a shed, something like that. It doesn't matter if it stays warm. It doesn't need to stay warm. In fact, you don't want it to stay warm inside of those areas, because you want these landscape plants and these figs, these other plants that are normally planted out in your landscape, you want them to go dormant through the winter. You don't want to try and keep them alive through the winter. I know a lot of you guys are moving these things into the house. Your little rooted cuttings of landscape plants are getting moved into the house. It's okay to keep house plants in there, but when you start moving these landscape plants into the house, you bring in all kinds of pests and diseases and problems that go along with it. Not that that can't be combated, but it just makes it a little more difficult. I never have problems with fungus gnats and fungal issues and other pests or things, mites, things like that can come around indoors. I never have problems with those things outside. So when you bring all these plants in and keep them from going dormant, but keep them in a warm environment in the house through the winter, I don't necessarily think it's a good thing. You're also having to spend a lot more money on lighting to keep these guys growing through the winter, because they're not going dormant. Then you got fertilizer. There's a lot of issues that come with bringing these plants indoors. The winter time's kind of a break for me, in fact. I mean, I can just let these guys freeze hard as a rock out here. They go to sleep. I keep them watered once a month. I don't have to fertilize. I don't have to worry about pests. I don't have to worry about anything out here. And then come spring, I just fertilize everything with a slow release fertilizer, and it all just wakes up and starts growing on its own again. So stop worrying about your rooted cuttings, guys. They're going to be just fine. Just give them a little bit of protection. Keep them moist through the winter. Make sure first you're working with plants that are actually going to be able to take the cold temperatures. And I proved this in previous videos. If you haven't seen them, go through the library of videos that I've got together over the years here, and you'll see several videos where I actually started filming these little cuttings, little rooted cuttings in the fall, put them out in the rain, snow, ice, wind, all of it, and then kept the film going into the spring and showed you these guys were just fine and they took off and started growing again. I've got another video where I did an experiment for myself with rhododendrons. I took a freshly rooted cutting of a rhododendron, I planted it straight out into soil, and it's still alive today. It's probably 3 foot high, blooms beautifully every year. It's about 5 years old. These cuttings will do just fine as long as they're cold hardy to your area. So stop worrying, guys. Give them a little bit of protection from winds. Make sure they're moist through the winter. Let them go dormant, and you're going to be just fine. So, having said that, I will tell you that I'm trying something a little new. Every year I'm trying new different things just to push the envelope, to test the limits and see what we can get away with. And right now, all the figs I had outside are still outside. The last couple of years I brought them into this hoop house. This year they're sitting outside. I hope it's not a bad winter. They say it's going to be, but we're going to find out. I might take some cuttings and root them inside just for insurance, but we'll see what happens, guys. In the meantime, stop worrying. I hope you learned something here. I hope it put your mind at ease a little bit. If you like this video, if you got something out of it, hit the like button. Subscribe if you guys want to follow along and see all these guys wake up next spring, because I'm not worried about it. Have a fantastic week, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Adios.